Mike, how was your weekend?
My weekend was horrific. Creeping eldritch horrors, the most awful torture. It shocked me to my core, and I don't think I'm ever going to be the same again.
What happened?
I had to go to a 5-year-old's birthday party.
That is actually all of those things. You're correct.
I was lucky to walk away with just like a pink heart on my cheek that had been painted on.
Is there a picture? Do we get to see that?
No, you do not.
Oh, I know there isn't a picture. No, I don't get to see it.
I'm pleading the fifth here. But yeah, it was fine. It was a kid's birthday party, but it nicely brings us on to talking about this week's theme. Welcome to In Orbit every Wednesday, Earthlets, where we're going to be talking Judge Dredd and horror with our special guest, Nick Percival.
Get 2000 AD now. Get 2000.
Borag Earthlets, this is In Orbit every Wednesday. I am your host, Molch-R. This is your host, KLO-E, and we are joined on this episode by Judge Dredd artist Nick Percival. Hi, Nick. How you doing?
Hi, guys. Hiya.
Hey, Nick.
Hiya.
Good, wonderful. But we've got you on because Judge Dredd: The Shift is the theme, horror, the theme of this episode. Like we said last week. We're talking about how Judge Dredd and horror work. Thank you to everybody for your feedback from last week's episode. Many suggestions for underappreciated 2000 AD creators, all the way from Ian Gibson, people like that, all the way through to somebody who suggested Alan Moore.
What?
He's a guy who went nowhere.
Yeah, I can kind of see it, but maybe a near miss. But yes, some wonderful things. I had one email vote for the Ace Trucking Company reprints.
Yes. It was me in a trench coat. Like
So yes, I shall. Thank you very much to them. I shall pass that along to our editors. But we are talking about Prog 2419 this week, which continues Judge Dredd: The Shift, Full Tilt Boogie, Hawk the Slayer, Portals and Black Goo, and Fiends of the Eastern Front. KLO-E, what are your highlights of this issue? Because we talked about The Shift and Full Tilt Boogie last week, didn't we?
Yes. And I feel like this week it was just more like kind of rough 'em up fun, which I'm very here for. And again, especially because it feels like there are actually a number of like horror focused stories going right now. Full Tilt Boogie kind of feels like this sort of thing in the middle of all of that. And it was like, is there such a thing as jarring in a good way? Like
contrasting. Let's say contrasting.
That's the adult wording of it. But yeah, I'm still actually really enjoying that little bit of fresh air, and especially when, and I'm not just saying this because you're right there, Nick, but like The Shift has got me like on. I'm very ready.
Oh, good.
This is so much like in my wheelhouse, and Dredd. Well, we're going to be talking about this a lot in this episode, but Dredd lends itself so well to like horror concepts, and seeing that leaned into really heavily, it does absolutely everything for me.
Thank you.
I mean, you're right. It is weird how everything bar Full Tilt Boogie has like a even a little bit of horror. I mean, obviously, Fiends of the Eastern Front is full of horror. but it's the same with Portals and Black. I mean, you got Cursor to Doom in Portals and Black Goo, Hawk the Slayer. There's always kind of like that slightly horrific aspect to fantasy, which is really nice. But yeah, I guess it's one of those points where we're kind of midway through a lot of different runs of things. We've talked about the stuff that started new last week. So really, this week, like we said in the last episode, we wanted to focus on horror. Why does horror work with Judge Dredd? It's a sci-fi strip, and yet, Haunting of Sector House 9, Cry of the Werewolf, Necropolis, and The Dark Judges. It seems to be one of those strips that manages to do everything. And I think it's great to have you on, Nick, so that, you can speak to the kind of Eldritch style Geiger-esque horror that you do, and the current story that you're doing with Ken Niemand. Tell us a little bit about your work on The Shift, because I mean, as you said off camera, you're taking some time out of racing towards deadline on the last episode, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, The Shift does link into the previous two Dredds that I did with Ken, which was The House on Bleecker Street and Iron Teeth, which initially dealt with the underworld sort of side. And we were wanting to expand the supernatural horror side of Dredd's world. So all those stories are linked. In fact, we've got a new recurring cast that, you do see in all three of those series. And each one's got longer as we've gone along. This is 8 parts, The Shift. So it's a conscious decision where we did sit down and say, we do really want to develop this side of his world. And again, it's nice to take him a little bit out of his comfort zone as well. When, like you're saying about the mix of horror in Dredd's world, where you can't overly rely on the tech and the sort of sci-fi things to support him. So you throw him in this world where that doesn't necessarily work because there's mystical supernatural forces at play and so on. So it does throw him in. Obviously, Dredd's Dredd and he'll do what he does, but it's nice to throw him in those scenarios where not everything's guaranteed, and especially on this one, because, like I say, it starts with him getting a message from himself in the shift world. So he goes to investigate how that could even happen. And I think we're still in setup phase, to be honest. I think it's only part 2 this week, so it's still primarily setting stuff up, and it does really kick off round about part 4. To be honest, I'm surprised Sarg's letting us get away with a lot of the stuff that we're actually doing in this. There's some pretty extreme stuff coming up, and every time I'm sending pages, I'm like thinking, is he going to maybe say pull back a little bit or whatever? But we do push it. So I mean, I'm having a blast doing it, to be honest, and it's just nice to sort of. I mean, I did Dark Judges for so long, but it's still nice to stay within the horror genre, and hopefully, me and Ken can build something quite memorable, in Dredd's mythology with this.
I feel like a lot of stuff that you've worked on, not just solely with Dredd, has been very horror focused. Is horror just a thing for you in general?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I said, I did the Dark Judges for 4 series, and they were in the magazine. They were like 100 pages each, so that was a big chunk of work, and obviously horror based. But I spent 2 years painting Hellraiser covers for the Clive Barker comics, and to be honest, I'd say 90% of my output is horror, which I'm cool with, to be honest. I mean, I don't mind being in that corner. It's nice to have something to just, being pigeonholed as that is fine. So, people keep throwing me horror stuff. I'm totally down with it. I'm a massive horror fan anyway, just from the old Universal monsters through to like modern Del Toro sort of stuff. So it's, I mean, Ken's been great on the script, because it's almost been like, what do you? I mean, obviously we've got a bigger picture at play, but it's also what sort of things do we want to include? So we referenced films back and forth like 13 Ghosts, Silent Hill, that sort of stuff. It was trying to sort of get a little bit of that atmosphere into Dredd, quite textural, dirty, grimy sort of feel to it. And I mean, hopefully it comes across. You never know how stuff's going to look in print, but I'm actually quite pleased with it so far. So hopefully, and the fans seem to like it. So so that's good.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I even remarked to Mike last week, like you're kind of the perfect artist to work on a story like this, because it does feel like just ethereal in kind of an uncomfortable, like dirty sort of way, and especially in a supernatural horror story,
Yeah, I mean, stylistically, it's great because you're just given that freedom then, because there's no rules really, because it's not, it isn't real, and it is, there's monsters and creatures, and it's kind of like a parallel mega city in this one. It's really, you can do whatever you want, and to give it that mystical feel to contrast with the slick sci-fi side of Dredd's world, it is intentional, and hopefully it comes across. So yeah.
It definitely does come across. I don't want to give too much away for those who are just getting a chance to read this newest installation of it. But how was creature design for you? Because that's definitely something that interests me.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I say, there will be elements in the script, so Ken will have ideas as a starting point, and then it's more. Then obviously I'll put my spin on it as well. So it's a nice combination, but. What I've tried to do, and I don't know if you've seen part 2 yet, but there's a I won't spoil it, but there's a final sort of splash page at the end of part 2 where these creatures appear, and I really wanted to do things that probably quite difficult to do in 2D, like sort of juddering, sort of weird, sort of like effects and stuff. Like in Jacob's Ladder film, you see this kind of effects, that kind of weird sort of stuff to freak you out a bit. And how far can you do that in 2D? So I was messing around with a couple of techniques to do that, and. Yeah, I was quite pleased with it, actually. I'm going to use it. It does appear again later on. It's there is some pretty strong stuff in it. I mean, it's all justified with the story and everything. We're not just being gratuitous, but there is some stuff certainly around about part 4 that like pushes it a little bit. And Ken was keep going, "Oh, go further." And I'm like thinking, well, Tharg might have a couple of words to sort of say about that. So a little bit of self-restraint on some of the episodes, I think.
Tharg needs to let the people have the fun.
He's
Mike, are you a horror guy? I don't think we've ever had this conversation. Like, are you a horror dude?
Not. I mean, it's not massively. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat.
That tracks.
Yeah.
I imagine you to be really into fault horror, Mike. I imagine you to be a fault horror type guy, but.
I mean, this is the thing. If there's horror, I like it folk tinge. So obvious things like The Witch, Wicker Man, things like that, where it's sinister more than anything, rather than kind of jump scare. Because my wife is a huge horror fan, but doesn't really do jump scares. So she voraciously reads horror novels and listens to audiobooks, but with horror movies, it's a bit more difficult. I mean, she likes kind of Final Destination and things like that. But for me, it's all about the atmosphere. It's all about that sinister kind of background, fear of the unknown more than anything.
Final Destination is plenty sinister. I just mainlined all 5 of those movies with my partner. And those, why is it the same premise every single time? And yet we still continue to watch it.
Especially the last one. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Back to the beginning. Yeah.
So
it's really just trying to capture mood really. And obviously, we've only got 6 pages per episode to play with, but it's just trying to build that environment and build these creatures and just create atmosphere, really build an atmosphere, because we really did want to contrast with the slick side of things. So that's the sort of direction we're going at the moment, anyway.
So, kind of in regards to that, how does not just working with Judge Dredd as a character, but how does working with like the world and specifically with Mega City 1, like, because we've only seen 2 parts of the story so far, and I already feel like Mega City 1 is its own kind of villain. Yeah. In a way. So how does working within that world come into play for you when it comes to building that atmosphere?
I mean, like I say, Mega City 1, I mean, the bits we're dealing with the Mega City 1 it relates a lot to Chaos Day stuff. So it's all the sort of ruined and decayed kind of mega city anyway, that seems to have never been cleaned up since Chaos Day, and that seems to be the origin for a lot of these kind of stories, certainly the supernatural stuff that Ken's been building on. So yeah, I mean, one of the difficulties really was still making sure that when we're in the shift side, it does actually look different, because obviously, I think you said last week, still the mega city that I'm doing looks pretty downbeat anyway, so yeah. So in a sense, the starting point is quite grim. So, and then obviously I'm trying to make it different when we go into the shift, and then how far can you take it so it does look different? So that was a little bit of a challenge. So I've done things with color palettes and stuff that hopefully plays off that. It's when we're in Mega City, it's much more blues and grays and so on. But when we're in the shift, it's to do with greens and yellows, and so we got that visual kind of cue, so to speak. When we're in that world. So, and in the story, we're flipping back and forth between the two environments anyway. So I mean that sort of separates it quite well. But yeah, it's the whole thing's just foreboding. I think Mega City is a pretty dominant, scary place anyway. And then I'd say the challenge was when we go into the shift side to sort of build upon that and take it even further. When your starting point is so stark anyway, it is a bit of a much to try and take that further in the shift world. So. But we see more of it as we go along, so the split becomes even more obvious. And then slowly the shift stuff is going to encroach on Mega City 1 as well. So it kind of seeps beyond this tower block. So it's not really a spoiler, but it goes beyond the tower block. So we do get to see some weird things happen in Mega City as well. So.
That's music to my ears.
One of the things I noticed in the first episode, there's a bit of, I mean, it's not a jump scare, but there's like a bit of a switch scare, where all of a sudden you see something. Spoilers. It's the old lady in the wheelchair. And she looks over, and we can see something that the droid that she's with cannot. And I guess we talked about it on the podcast previously with other artists and creators. How do you do? What's the secret to doing comic book horror? Because you the only kind of control you have over time frame is the turning of the page.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You are limited, and in a sense, we have played to that. Certainly on this episode. You've got that page turn, so your final page is again equivalent a little bit of a jump scare. So you can dictate a little bit to the reader in terms of, because where those, certainly with Dredd, because it always starts at the beginning of the comic, where page one's going to be and where the last page is going to be. So you can build to that. The thing you were saying in part one, where we see something weird in the background, and then the droid turns and looks and it's not there. Again, that was just keeping the panel exactly the same as well. So it's literally as it would be if it was in a film. Something's there. So that the whole thing, they open the fridge door, close the fridge door, and it's the creature's there and it's not there. So the only way I could kind of do that was, again, keep the panel exactly the same. So one minute you see it, the next minute you don't. You are limited because you've not got motion, obviously. So it's difficult to kind of scare a reader. But yeah, page turns is about the way you can do it, and we do a lot of that as well. There are some other elements where it is a page turn and it is in your face, but. It's it's difficult.
Just trying to, I think that would do my head in, just trying to figure out the pacing of things. Like with horror in particular, I think horror, when most people think horror, they automatically jump to horror movies. Yeah. But it's such a great genre because even horror movies end up being the thing that branch out and kind of influence horror in every other medium. So it's the question that everybody hates, and I'm very excited. What are some of the horror movies that have like influenced you the most on projects like this, or on the Dark Judges even? Like, because there is a very distinct style to how you tell these kinds of horror stories. So I got to know where that came from.
I mean, my original horror roots was, I'm a massive fan of the old Universal Monsters stuff. So I love the 1930s black and white, Frankenstein.
I can see the stuff on your wall behind you.
All that kind of stuff. So I mean, I love that as far as like a stylistic thing, because it's stuff hiding in the shadows, very slow paced and so on. And then obviously think of modern horror. I mean, I'm not a big gore hound, surprisingly. I mean, obviously the Dark Judges had a load of gore in it, and there's a little bit in the shift, not a lot really. So I'm not a massive gore hound, even though I have seen all the stuff. I've seen all the Saw movies and blah blah blah. But as far as modern horror goes, and an influence, I suppose, a flip between things like what Guillermo del Toro will do. So everything's with the creature designs very stylistic. He's got a great color palette. He uses a lot of color, which a lot of people don't use in horror. It's very muted and very saturated, but there's a lot of color in Del Toro stuff. I looked at that a lot for the Dark Judges, because a lot of the stuff I did in Dark Judges was actually very colorful. It wasn't actually very sort of grim. There was a lot of color in it, so that was a big influence there. With the shift, I suppose it's a little bit more leaning towards little bit more on the game side of things. I mean, we've talked a lot about Silent Hill, quite like the sort of like textural, gritty sort of palette from that. And from the mood and the atmosphere, right through to things like, I'm a big fan of like films like It Follows, which again, I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes.
It's one of my favorites where it's slow paced, but it's all about context because obviously it's so normal looking, yet the weird stuff is going off. So that gives it an increased horror feel because it's so everyday. And then, oh my God, the stuff that's going on in that. So that was used as an attempt to sort of that slow build and that creeping horror. So I think is what they say, isn't it? Is a genre.
Yeah.
And 13 Ghosts we looked at a little bit as well for some of like the creatures and sort of different, the variety and so on. So it's all in there. And hopefully, like I say, I'll crib little bits from or will give me ideas. And like I say, that's hopefully what comes across on the page.
The creatures that we see in this second episode was kind of giving me like Hellraiser vibes as well.
Yeah, Cenobite sort of stuff. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's probably in my blood. Like I say, I spent a couple of years doing Hellraiser stuff. So, and obviously all the classic, Pinhead and whatnot. But obviously there's some more bizarre Cenobites as well. So there's probably elements of that. It's what you can get away with visually because, like I say, you've not got that motion, so you have to make an impact with a static image. And, so it's like kind of almost like chucking everything in the pot in one go because they can't move. So it's just it's really trying to get that big sort of like punchy, sort of in your face moment when we first see them, again on the page turn, at the end of this episode.
You have to really turn it up to 11.
There's a lot more to come.
Yay!
Are there because we talked a lot about film. Are there kind of Judge Dredd moments that you draw on? Because like I said, the strip has a long history going all the way back to 1981 with horror. Are there key kind of Judge Dredd moments that stand out for you that have influenced?
Obviously the Boland's Dark Judges is a massive thing. That scared me when I saw it as a kid. It was just so. That first panel of Judge Death, when you first see him, it was played so straight when you're coming out of the mist. It really did freak me out. So that stayed with me. So I've always looked at Boland's stuff, and like I say, even some stuff on Judgment Day. To be honest, I quite like some elements of that. I'm not the singing zombies are probably where I tuned out a little bit on some elements of Judgment Day, but there's some great visuals in that. And Dean Raptor as well, that the alien type thing that Dean did with Dean Ormston did the Raptor. I thought that was a bit underrated, unappreciated, kind of like alien-esque Mega City One horror thing. So they're all sort of in there. But if I had to pinpoint it, it would still have to be Boland's Dark Judges. That was such a seminal moment, and the character designs on that is phenomenal. It's just unmatched, I think, so far. Yeah.
Well, this brings us back to kind of the central theme of this episode, which is why does Dredd work with horror? Because like I said in last episode, for me, there's a fundamental horror in Judge Dredd, which is the horror of the police. There is this power that which is the recourse. There is no recourse to the recourse, as it were. But so often it's able to reference classic horror. It's able to do its own horror. It's able to have body horror and creeping horror and things like that. So what is it about Dredd that means he can work in, a sci-fi cop can work in horror?
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a good question because it's almost like there's no rules, and like you say, you've got Mega City One, you've got Dredd, and you think it'd be very much like, well, this is how things have got to be. It's a sci-fi future world, and we've got the Judges Society, and obviously, and a lot of the stories was all to do with the civilians, the wackiness. It was we're all wacky, wasn't it? All the craziness of Mega City One, and then like I say, you throw horror into it, and it just works. And I've not got, to be honest, I don't think I can really answer it. It's just that I'm surprised that you think on paper it wouldn't be a place where you'd have a lot of like traditional horror elements. You'd have a lot of sci-fi, dark stuff and so on. But I don't know. Dredd is the same, isn't he? No matter what scenario he's in, he still just deals with it. It's yeah. I don't know. To be honest.
But when mundanity is already horrifying. The idea that there is anything beyond that, especially something supernatural or something like mysterious and scary, it's like, okay, but how do we get worse than this? Like, how can you, like, anything that can possibly make this seem worse seems like the ultimate horror. And there's so many elements within the Dredd world, like between the judges themselves, or Dredds as a singularity, or just existing in like Mega City 1. It's all already horrifying. Like, how can you possibly, the idea of doubling down on that, like, the possibilities kind of seem endless for the horror concept, because it's already bad.
Well, it's that whole thing about, you look at someone like Judge Death, and Judge Death is different to other kind of arch nemesis in comic books, because he's not the opposite of Judge Dredd. He's his logical conclusion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, when you're criminalizing every aspect of everyday life, it is not much of a journey to the point where you criminalize life itself. But yeah, it's I like all the kind of the classic, almost silly horror, the Haunting of Sex House 9, the Judge Anderson stuff with like the Possessed, where it's quite grim, but fantastic. I mean, both of those. I think I really love Brett Ewing's artwork. I think that's what it boils. But yeah, and like you say, you can't beat that classic moment where Judge Death appears.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, it's just I mean, like I said, that had such an effect on me. Just because I don't think you'd seen it before. It was so. And it was such a short strip as well, wasn't it? The original one. It was just kind of like there for a little bit and then gone. It was just like, oh, no, we're back in Mega City 1. It was just, the impact it has is unbelievable. Yeah.
I think there's also, it is kind of that. It's like there's so many small moments that somehow change everything. And because everything is already kind of horrific, nothing changes. Well,
yeah,
it's
back to normal.
Like that alone is kind of an effective tool for anything that comes forward. There's also, at least I feel like reading Dredd, you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, in a sense.
Totally.
So, and I mean, that's kind of what horror does, is it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and Dredd is so effective for that.
Well, if you're listening or watching this, then do get in touch and tell us what your favorite horror moments of Dredd are, and we'll go
those
through
are going to be some good ones.
Yeah. And absolutely, like I said, there's the kind of classic horror ones, the obvious horror ones, and then there's you could almost say something like America is horror.
Yeah,
that's a horror story of what life is like. So yeah, do drop us a line in the comments on YouTube, email thrillcast@2000ad.com, and Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere, really. Nick, thanks so much for this. This has been absolutely fascinating. I mean, any kind of non-spoilery kind of hints as to what we can expect in the later episodes of The Shift?
Like I said, there are a lot of certainly from part 4 onwards. There's a thing in part 5. I won't say what it is, but it's almost like a splash page. But it's something that Ken's been building on. We talked about. He introduces a thing that when you see it and you kind of see Dredd's reaction to it, and then we don't touch upon it again until the very last episode. But it's something that, if it pays off and he develops it in such a way, it would be a massive game changer for a lot of things that have actually happened with the judges and the mythology. So there's something that appears and something we see, and then we come back to it briefly, and we are going to work on another series that will build upon it, that kind of almost turns everything on its head. That I can't really say much more than that, to be honest, but you'll see in part 5. So.
I think this is a perfect time.
I'll get told off probably for saying even that. We'll see.
But I think this is perfect time to deploy the thrill power klaxon.
The klaxon.
Let me tell you, with my frustration over the klaxon, the temptation, like I was at home the other day and somebody was like, do you need anything from the store? And I was 2 seconds away from being like an air horn, an actual air horn. I am this close, Mike, to just buying an air horn, and I'm gonna deploy it when you least expect it, from over on the side over here.
Sorry, it's just I had to lighten the mood.
No.
Bam, bam, bam. I'm going to get my
wonderful.
Hey guys, like and subscribe. Like, I'm going to get my dumb YouTube air horn sound in there, come hell or high water. Okay. And that's
Brilliant.
the real horror story of this.
Is that right? Oh, anyway, right. But we're actually going to finish on time this week.
Wow.
It's very important. I know. It's
Very
incredible. But Nick, thank you so much for being our guest. Looking forward to seeing how the shift develops. Like I said, if you want to get in touch, thrillcast@2000ad.com, or comment on YouTube about your favorite Judge Dredd horror moments. We're going to be back in 7 days' time, when talking about more from the galaxy's greatest comic. And maybe we'll actually do more on the prog next week, I think.
Yeah, it's a surprise what we're going to do.
Wonderful. Well, until next time, I think, what an idiot. Check out the deep dive, which was published last Saturday, which is my colleague Steve diving into either a modern classic or something from the vault. The first episode of this new show was him talking to Sarah Century about The Out, which is absolutely bloody amazing. So do check it out. The deep dive goes out the second Saturday of every month, and then the creator interviews will be the fourth Saturday of every month. And as I revealed on the first deep dive, the first creator interview, the first creator tapes of the new show will be Simon Bisley. Because I'm a glutton for punishment. So look forward to hearing me just being really awkward and uncomfortable in Simon's house. But until then, Earthlets, do make sure you like and subscribe. Ha 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 ha. And we shall see you in 7 days' time. So from Chloe, it's.
What?
You speak when
Oh, I didn't know.
Is this a podcast?
I'm getting worse at it every week. And now somebody's going to go into the YouTube comments and say that I look horrified again.
So, from Chloe, it's...
Yeah, it's we'll see you next week. What am I supposed to say, Mike?
Just goodbye.
Goodbye.
It's traditional. And from Nick, it's
cheers.
There we go. That's how it's done, Chloe.
No, it's not.
And from me, it's Splendid Verthrig. See you next week, Earthlets.
Get 2000 AD now. Get to
Well, thanks for joining us on In Orbit every Wednesday, Earthlets. Make sure you like and subscribe, and go along to 2000 AD, where you'll be able to subscribe to 2000 AD and the Judge Dredd magazine. Sign up to our newsletter and you'll get hundreds of pages of free comics to download. And download the app for your Apple and Android devices. Now, don't forget, Earthlets, this is the 2000 AD universe. We just live in it.